Kawameba, Jimeba, Chibameba,
Tameba, Wameba, Domeba, Tajatime, Jimmy, Tabaji, Yamano, Yakambanda. Now today, about Bodhichitta altruism. Basically, all religious tradition they carry the importance of altruism. Then I think a unique thing about Buddhism is the concept of interdependency or Patithasamuppada. I think that's the very, very unique about Buddhism. So in our daily life, even non-believer, I think altruism certainly very basis of our well-being, including physical well-being. Because more Torvasade showing concern to others, that I think the way of the attitude is something, I think the self-confidence. People who showing concern about others, himself, herself, some confidence. Out of fear, showing concern to others is difficult. So more self-confidence brings less fear, more inner strength. As a result, physical level also more kasoda. All the physical element then function more normal. Under fear, constant anger, constant hate, the physical element then much disturbed. So even the physical well-being, I think altruistic mind is something very, very helpful. And particularly when you're passing through difficult period. Altruistic attitude, altruism really act as a sustain peace of mind, calm mind. So that's one thing. Then Patithasamuppada, or the concept of interdependency. That also very, very helpful in our daily life, because the reality, everything interdependent. In economy field, or the ecology field, or health field, I think everything, even politics, international relations, the reality heavily interdependent. So that's the reality. But often appears as those interesting or something dangerous appears something independent, something isolated. So our method, according appearances, then our method becomes unrealistic. So with fuller knowledge about the interdependency and the thing which positive or negative in reality depend on many factors. So knowing that, then dealing that become more realistic. It seems many unwanted sort of things happen because of unrealistic approach. So on that level, I think the Buddhist concept, interdependency, that brings the idea of holistic. That brings more realistic attitude. So it is useful. Now, altruism, that in the samjik, that the under the samji is the sam sangbo, that's a Day4-am, she doing a chana sama imba, doing the room much tongue. Any, the niche that tongue gone, any, that champagne logic, dry. So the need is an and tragedy, the shungs not the sudua. The Ningji, some generally. Shiruk Changzul mix. So that couldn't some digital.
So now we'll be dealing with the topic of generating the awakening mind or Bodhichitta. And as explained before, here we're not talking about a state of mind that's simply based upon a kind of a yearning for happiness and yearning to overcome suffering. But rather, the awakening mind of Bodhichitta must be cultivated on the basis of a conviction that recognizes the possibility of achievement of happiness and possibility of achievement of the cessation of suffering. And motivated by that understanding, you then develop the aspiration to bring about others' welfare in the most effective manner. So this is what is meant by Bodhichitta, the awakening mind, Semkye, or generating the awakening mind, mind generation. And so in some texts, it is stated that with compassion, one focuses on the sentient beings, and with wisdom, one focuses on the attainment of enlightenment. So it shows the role of altruism and wisdom in the context of the path.
So that day, on the samjik pen, the samni, the simti chidrik gave it to Zadatilla. That's also the Ninjil to the Are. Dorian Tay Zaw Ninjid, so on the Chanju Simkaza, Ninjil to Sonre.
So then, having reflected upon the benefits of generating awakening mind, Bodhichitta, and then Tsongkhapa goes on to explain the actual procedure by which this mind is generated. And here, the principal element really is the cultivation of compassion. For example, in Maitreya's ornament of Mahayana Sutras, he explains that the root of Bodhichitta, the awakening mind, is compassion.
That Ningjis Dizane, call it the Chajin Ni Changudua, Kang Dungin Nawa, Nare, Yu Tela, Jeshipang will look at it. Da Te Dungin Kang Nare, Dungelia, Pasor Pugeta, to jump to the law. Then this name into, jump this name into, that the gum didn't use the jump this story. Oh, that's a jiggy, Lonibukuya.
So, if you look at the understanding of what is meant by compassion, we will see two principal aspects to this mind. One is a sense of affection that holds other sentient beings as dear, and the other element, the sentient beings for whose suffering you're concerned about. So the one element is to cultivate a sense of affection for the sentient beings for whose suffering you're concerned about, and holding them to be dear. And the second element is a wish to help these sentient beings bring about a relief of their suffering. So these are the two elements that are a part of the compassion.
That tunge ngotrade and the jibu chungni that tunge ngotr chayre jibu chungnu khadul tunge tunge samya de jikse ti gyur jabdi jiksamda da dene jibu ring khadulia ani gyue tunge da 하고도 두지기 등에 못해야 다 디디 등에디 뭐지 쳐대요 봐다 나 등에 뭐지 쳐니는데 랑den도 두지기 등에 있는 사람이 전에 랑니 두지기 등에를 전되기다 로지 탄도 타버되니로 민중사야 되체 다디 현대도 파 가교인들 전에 아니 가라 현대니 현주지 양대인라 송는신甚至把你现对去세하게 현지 돈 세하게 돈 현지 양대를 상담네 랑딩이 냠을 빠네 아니 랭유지 상황제 또 랭유지 상황제게 아니 코압에 섬제 디디 아니 동의진의 주대 다 랑냠을 빠네 상무스타인 되잖아요 아니 지 코용도 와다 텔라야 다다 동의기는 심바다 다들 동행에 매나야 동행이 교 차상지 다 여대 봐. 근데 sometimes 전에 아니 동행 주세요. 젠드 로직 레인 거 같아. 다 디기 닌질로 자야 돼.
So
데이터라 다 두지기 동행에서 전에 저 녀몽기다 님이 상담하지도 와. 자다 지정기 녀몽라 그게 가소를 그게 님이 스토 대책이 묘모 대샤베 방사 사주버 다 교도부도 더 되게 되지 아니 그 첼레로 콜이야 지 시시시바로 파도 줘야 지 현주도발라 그 개진 첨부시게 되지 다가는 신기 지 다좀버솔레 지 가서 우리 그 룡하게 내는 이제 통용고요 아래 다 대주택이 다 가다 뇽베 샤베 바자기 네버디 통일도잖아요. 다 텔레 탄도로지, 텔레 전도로지, 다고 용도가. 다 디르지 그러셔.
So these two being the key elements that constitute the mental state that we call compassion. So the key, it becomes crucial to have a deeper understanding of what we mean by suffering, from which we wish that all sentient beings to be free of. And as for the development of the understanding of the nature of suffering, this has already been covered in the presentation of the practices relevant to the practice path of the initial capacity and middle intermediate capacity. In the initial capacity, the focus was more on understanding the nature of suffering at the level of evident, everyday suffering in the form of a physical sensation. And in the context of explanation of the path of the practices of intermediate capacity, the main focus was on understanding the nature of suffering at the second and the third level, which is the suffering of change, and more importantly, the suffering of pervasive conditioning. And so having contemplated on the nature of suffering in these profound terms, then one develops a genuine aspiration to seek liberation from suffering. And at that point, one would have attained what is called true renunciation or ngenjung. And so once you have attained that, then on the basis of relating one's own personal experience of having developed this genuine aspiration to attain freedom from suffering, when you extend that to other sentient beings, suffering sentient beings, then compassion arises. So here, because, for example, in Maitriya's ornament of clear realization, Abhisamaya Alamkara, when he defines Bodhichitta, he says that mind generation, the generated awakening mind is for the sake of other sentient beings, for the welfare of other sentient beings. And when Tsongkhapa explains that passage, he says that the welfare of other beings here refers to the attainment of liberation of other sentient beings. So in other words, compassion is a state of mind where you aspire for other sentient beings to attain liberation from samsara, from suffering. So, and here, the more your understanding of the nature of suffering is, the more effective that aspiration will be. And also, particularly, if your understanding of the suffering of pervasive conditioning is profound, then there will be a stronger recognition of the destructive nature of the afflictions, which are the root of this suffering of conditioning. And the more you are able to recognize the destructive nature of the afflictions, then the aspiration will also arise to not only be free from the afflictions, but also the propensities created by these afflictions. And these are the propensities which come in the way of gaining full omniscient mind. And so these are subtle obscurations to total knowledge, full knowledge, and therefore the aspiration to attain Buddhahood, that is characterized by overcoming of even the subtle obscurations to knowledge. So that aspiration arises as well.
So, da dine shen kang dungne jin nawa nawe simjen di de la jie xi pang be lo yuan ya de la yong ge na ba zhi zhu gu ya.
So now the first element of compassion, which was to have this sense of affection for other sentient beings, in order to cultivate that ability to hold other sentient beings to be dear, you need to cultivate a sense of connection and affection for other beings.
Da jie xi pang be lo zhu ya de la da ni che che 명아 준데 뒤에 거네 로자가 직 다시 비고 로자 직 인쇼.
So as for the method for cultivating this sense of affection that holds other sentient beings to be dear, they evolved historically two main approaches. One is the 7-point cause and effect approach or method. The other one is the method of exchanging and equalizing self and others.
The Chidanshana and the Unimanga Dumilo Jayadi, the Champadema Cubada, the Soshet, the Dashim Jidi, Jayanama Cubche, Labjin Juju Sundua, Gobulu Jugi, Umarji Tavanale, Dashim Jidi, Hangor Changju Samjin Nalia, Dashim Jidi, Zadvision Sundua.
So in general, and in general, these two methods or approaches are traced to two different lineages. The 7-point cause and effect method stemming from the lineage of Maitreya and so on, and the equalizing and exchanging of self and others stemming from Nagarjuna. For example, in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, and also particularly in his commentary on the awakening mind, Bodhichitta Vivarana, the approach of the equalizing and exchange of self and others is very explicitly presented.
So, the Givatella, Namju and the Largin Juju, so Tanyan Dotante. That is just a woman number to be as passage. The name is and the Juju Nani. Sang Tamba Jabberjas, Dada Shan Jawas, Sang Tamba Jabberjas, and Sunday Hati, the Ributami, the Shuksha, that the need is an go some donda 다 직슈디 년도 주야지 말아서 년도 줘야지 봐. 다 저거디 년도 주고야 개매봐. 다신지 상당히 되잖아요. 그 타치도 가서다 그다 그나 자이네 자디 초시다진 상담에는 진심이 임바다. 다 dakshanyamba dendegi thone samstan induzane ko shu niba chedowa so labchin susha labchin juju.
So given that the second approach stems from Nagarjuna and which emphasizes the equalizing and exchanging of self and others, this particular lineage is referred to as the lineage of practices resembling great waves. And the point here is that this is an approach that is more suited to practitioners of high caliber, advanced practitioners. And because if you compare the two, in the first approach, 7-point cause and effect method, the key element there is to cultivate the perception of other sentient beings as being related to you, either as your mother or somehow related to you. And on that basis, then the remaining kind of practices are built on. Whereas if you look at the exchanging and equalizing of self and others, this does not require considering others as somehow related to you, but rather it takes the practice at the level where you recognize the fundamental equality of yourself and others in terms of aspiration for happiness. And therefore, in Shantideva's text, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where he says that one should exchange self with others and thereby engage in the put into practice this instruction, which is secret, suggesting the need for greater intelligence. So in the second approach, the main approach is really by a way of reasoning to try to establish that fundamental equality.
But those then, you remember to make a dulia, Marshi Tindens Jenny. The song soon is an page, Parub, Jabati, Namjurti, that catching with the Stomido. Daxin is an much Tindin Kabawacheni, sometimes you already, in a tower of the Daxiniga, to him into somebody, down to somebody, Seni. 남주께 시험도와 캐스톰도 그는 아주 남중에 셔야 돼. 그는 닝질이야. 아주 남중 닝지 패바디 바로 자주를 셔야 돼도. 근데 이르잖아요. 라는 팬 당에게 닝지 쳐라. 닝지 뛰게 하래. 라는 너버층에 다이 쳐라 닝지 뛰고도 와. 자상은 닝지 뛰 잡을 텐데 들어봐. 남줄 텐데. Tichajina somda maybe English Lavayina, so Simson Coral Samda. Mother Di Namju Di Mabache. Namju Rani and Namju Sang and Namju Dipa, different question. Kanda did to him with the other Chipuris Luzane, so Chabopoter doing the so to get.
So earlier I forgot one point that His Holiness made that so in the approach of exchanging and equalizing of self and others, not only is it not contingent upon cultivating the recognition of other sentient beings as somehow related to you in familial terms, such as mother, but even it is possible to recognize the kindness of other sentient beings, say for example, even in the case of one's enemy who provides you an opportunity to further your spiritual growth and so on. So if you compare these two approaches, for example, in the case of the 7-point cause and effect method, which proceeds with the cultivation of recognition of all sentient beings as having been one's mother and reflecting upon their kindness and so on, one could say that there it still depends upon, it still relates to other sentient beings on the basis of how they appear to you and their actions. So whereas in the approach of exchanging and equalizing of self and others, how the other person appears to you and what their motivations are and what their actions are vis-a-vis you becomes a different question. What is happening is that you're connecting with the other person at the fundamental level where you recognize the equality, that just as I wish to be happy, achieve happiness and overcome suffering, this person too wishes to achieve happiness and overcome suffering. And at that level, your relation, your perspective upon your perception of the other person does not depend upon, it's not influenced by, or it's not dependent upon how that other person behaves towards you or how that other person relates to you. So therefore, generally, in my general talks, I often say that if we compare ordinary compassion with more cultivated compassion, there is a difference. Ordinary compassion seems to depend upon our perception of how other persons behave towards us, how they feel towards us. Therefore, we're able to extend our ordinary compassion only to our friends and family, whom we consider to be, whom we think cares about us. Whereas when you cultivate genuine compassion, then you are relating to that person at this fundamental human level. So the compassion is not contingent upon that person's behavior, but rather you are relating to this person at the level of a person. And how he behaves towards you, what he thinks of you, is a secondary issue. But so far as your own compassion is concerned, you are relating to that person at this level where you recognize the humanity of that person and relate to that person just as I wish to be happy, he or she too wishes to be happy. So there seems to be the difference here, where in one approach there is a dependence upon the other person's attitude and behavior. In the latter, there is no dependence upon the other person's attitude or behavior towards you.
Yeah. 당연한 다고디 내가 주도 dimati bare 따텔에 닝지 자체 준제션은 대주는 대우주서 대봐.
So now we will go through the first method, which is the 7-point cause and effect method. And here, among these 7 points, compassion is the principle, and all the other elements are either conditions leading up to compassion or the fruition or the result of compassion. So here the actual practice begins with the meditation on equanimity, cultivation of equanimity. So the meaning of equanimity in this context is to really bring about a certain equanimity in your own attitude and feeling towards all others, so that there is no discrimination of feeling of distance or nearness. So, and then the next stage is to then cultivate a recognition of all other sentient beings as someone dear to you. And here, taking an example of a person who is most dear to you in this life, maybe it is your mother or someone else, and then cultivating that understanding and sentiment, and then trying to view all other sentient beings in that same light. And then on that basis, we then proceed towards cultivation of the recognition of their kindness, and then the thought to repay their kindness, and then cultivating this affection that holds other beings to be dear, which then leads to compassion, and then compassion then culminates in laksam, which is this altruistic resolve. So the key defining factor of laksam, this altruistic resolve, is a sense of responsibility of bringing about others' welfare. So then the question arises, how do I go about bringing about others' welfare? How can I make this real? Then one needs to check about one's own current capacity. So then recognize the limitations of your current state, and because if you cannot take care of yourself, being able to take care of someone else is a difficult task. And there's a Tibetan expression that someone who has already fallen down is not going to be able to help someone get up. So although for the practitioner, the ultimate aim is to bring about others' welfare, but as a means towards that, one needs to cultivate the aspiration to seek enlightenment. So 다 정주퇴니 있어야게 정주퇴니 용할라 산지 고방사야지다 요 임버동 실럽셔벤 리마송아 다 랑기 시균 디땡네 나바트지 팀베 이신 루루이 뭐지 상도 고고도 다들 상도 먹으실 당고도야 내가 타바 여버지 아니 녀무 뽕루이 뭐지 셰베 있나 녀무 디샤고 바샤 뽕루이 뭐지 롤 코고로 봐 자, 다디 조조 다디 나 라메드 된 상다데 개치슈데 신 타치고 해지 신 가고 그러셔 다 심차라 chen 체다디 배지 가서 우리 벽에 과차야 배지 약수들이셔. So then, therefore, it becomes very important to cultivate the genuine aspiration to seek enlightenment. Now, in order to do that, it's not adequate simply to, proceed by kind of a naive assumption that enlightenment can be achieved. One needs to have a genuine conviction in the possibility of attainment of that enlightenment. So this would require the understanding that, in fact, this enlightenment can be realized within one's own mental continuum. And so this would require quite a lot of thinking. And so it becomes important to, first of all, have a genuine understanding of the possibility of attainment of liberation, moksha. And this would also involve the conviction and understanding that the afflictions can be brought to an end. So there is a possibility of a cessation of the afflictions, and that afflictions can be eliminated. And once you recognize the possibility of the elimination of the afflictions, then one will also extend that line of thinking to understand and recognize that even the propensities created by these afflictions can be removed and eliminated. So on that basis, one will be able to develop a genuine recognition of the possibility of attainment of Buddhahood. And for this, to really have a deeper understanding of the possibility of full enlightenment, my own feeling is that one needs to bring in the perspective of highest yoga tantra, which provides us a way of understanding the nature of consciousness as many different levels, and so that one can understand the possibility of attainment of full omniscience on the basis of the subtlemost, understanding the subtlemost level of consciousness.
뉴물 해주지에 세 때에도 상스 담배는 that cancer 도와 사버지 배절로 샤이 되지. 쉐 구시슬로이는 어디 임버동 사버지다 배지래.
So for example, when we try to understand the Mahayana presentation of the theory of the four kayas, the four embodiments of the Buddhahood, if we bring in the perspective of highest yoga tantra, and particularly the concept of fundamental innate mind of clear light, then on that basis one can then envision at least the possibility of how the four kaya concept makes sense. However, if you do not bring in that perspective, then one's understanding of the four kayas, the four embodiments of the Buddhahood, become rather vague.
자상 시르지 청주를 믹스되다 그래도 왔다 사무실당 가르쳐.
So this is the reason why the statement is found that with wisdom one focuses on enlightenment.
딱 그것을 공부시들이 동반 니투 가고지우사 따지가는 상당고도.
So this, in a way, we kind of already touched upon when we discussed the understanding of Nagarjuna's line when he says, by means of emptiness, the conceptualizations are calmed, and the alternative reading was, within emptiness, the false conceptualizations are dissolved and calmed.
나 dinner 청주지 semli야. 다 청주 세명에 배소지. 타바 세명이야. 청주 세명이야. 근데 이제 옆에 거도라 다 현대전이 사배 규천이 청주 전이로 리기도 와.
So once you have a true understanding of what is enlightenment, a valid cognition of what is liberation, then on the basis of aspiration to bring about others' welfare, one can then develop a genuine aspiration to seek enlightenment.
Yeah. 다 심지랑데 심지 뭐디 아니 현주된 얘기 준비 장 주체 정주된 얘기 누가도 총대는 유대에 아니 심 소심 대창주 심스.
So then Tsongkhapa explains what exactly is Bodhichitta, the awakening mind, and he defines it as a state of mind where the aspiration to bring about others' welfare serves as the cause and the condition, and the aspiration to attain Buddhahood is a concomitant factor, and on that basis one cultivates this mind.
다전에 다 심지 달랑 모여고는 처럼 민족 심리체 또 상정고네 가래라 심지 신내샤 말에 르르 힘들어 배로 줄이니 거는 심지 인시하라고 그래 모이고도
So and then there principally awakening mind or bodhicitta is of two kinds. One is the aspiring level of awakening mind, and the other one is the awakening mind in the form of engagement, actual engagement. But also from the point of view of corresponding levels of the path, there are four types of bodhicitta identified, but also there is a list of 22 different types of bodhicitta or awakening mind explained in the text, where different metaphors are used to define them.
다 민족이 개발은 자다 교수나로래 틈틈면다 여버래 전에다 아주 젊은이게 송야대 아니 남진 타버려 자오냐면 뭐 지고 깨는 거잖아요. 되는데보다 사바디 매매심체. 다 되네 남진 탑에 탑 자주선배 러저러 로바 캬바 담제에 자주선배 또바송네. 되네 죽도 물러져 뒤에 아니 다 도발랑 신제네 아니 죽습니다.
So as to these two principal types of bodhicitta, the awakening mind, the aspiring or aspirational bodhicitta, and engaging bodhicitta, how the two are distinguished. There seem to be slight differences of explanation in the classical Indian text. However, the Tsongkhapa's understanding is the following. So when the practitioner, as a result of cultivation of bodhicitta, arrives at a point where he or she gains realization of a single-pointed aspiration, a spontaneous single-pointed aspiration to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings, at that point the individual has attained the aspirational level of bodhicitta. And on that basis, when the practitioner cultivates the commitment to engage, implement this aspiration into practice, and commits himself to engaging the Bodhisattva practices, then takes the Bodhisattva vows, and after having received the Bodhisattva vows, from that point onwards, then his or her bodhicitta has turned into an engaging, awakening mind.
디 쿵디 디나리아 까말실레 곰름 쿵차나도와.
So Tsongkhapa bases this interpretation of the distinction between the two upon Kamalashila's text, the middle stages of the path. Yeah. Yeah. Second volume. Yes. Sorry, the first volume of the stages of the path. Yeah. Stages of meditation. Sorry. So this text, Bhavana Grama of Kamalashila, Stages of Meditation, it appears that he composed it in Tibet. So his main text that was composed in India seems to be Madhyamaka Aloka, the light of middle way. Similarly, his massive commentary, which is actually in 2 volumes, on Shantarakshita's Tattva Samgraha, that text also seemed to be composed in India. Quite an impressive work, actually. So this is a text that really needs to be studied, and it would be, helpful if professors here can take upon the task of translating it. So of course I read this text in the Tibetan version. Even then, my head starts, swirling around. So the professors, if you do take upon this task, before you do that, you need a big rest first. So the next section is training the mind in generating the awakening mind according to the approach of equalizing and exchanging of self and others.
자, 디데 professors of godnyo se gyure kadulia robots careful chawriya. Be cautious.
This reminds me of a story. This was once the Kadamba master Potoa at Rating Monastery. One day he was very busy trying to compile the catalog of a large amount of text, which were all kind of slightly jumbled. And, and this was a very difficult task, and he started getting really, really confused. And so at that point, one of his students came to see him and asked for an instruction. So this really annoyed Potoa. So he turned to the student and said, "What are you talking about?" And in fact, chased the student out. So similarly, when the professors are working on the translation of this very difficult text, inevitably you're going to be in that state of mind. So people around you will need to be a little cautious. So now from this point onwards, from the text, Tsongkhapa is explaining the method of training one's mind in generating the awakening mind according to the approach of equalizing and exchanging of self and others.
자, 가져와. 사만남들이 줄이 알아봐. 사만남들이 이제는 줄이 알아봐. 요시 가로 줄이 알아봐. 사만남들이.
사만남들이 이제는 요. 차상이 몇 간씩.
강가 영어로.
세진게 요 여러. But Sejing also exists. That was some grass also translated, isn't it?
세진 줄이래.
세진 요래.
세진 줄살래.
세진 간데 요래.
세진 돼봐?
요래.
줄살래.
줄살.
빼야 없다. Very good.
이제 줄닝 버래. 뼈탈로 근데 뼈탈로.
가.
뼈탈로 단다시네 된대지 맞아. 줄닝 버래.
빼야 오래.
It's excellent. Yeah.
Very good. 다시 로자야 다디 다데리 시월리 숭몽을 전하도와 다시 냠바 다지지 교고 도만을 삼아 현지인의 고도만을 삼아 다시 제가 삼아을 달 때는 동네 검주.
So of course the explanation on how to proceed in the training of one's mind according to the approach of equalizing and exchanging of self and others is extensively presented in the text here in Tsongkhapa, by Tsongkhapa. And the steps are the following. When one proceeds with first cultivating the equality of self and others, and then one moves on to contemplating the disadvantages of self-cherishing, and then the advantages of the thought cherishing others' welfare. And then on that basis, one actually engages in the actual training of exchanging itself. And then succeeded by meditation on Tonglen, giving and taking.
다시 원래 준주 패지 들을 개변하는 자로서도와 다 들을 수 있지 그래. 뒤다도도 패지 다심지 전주 섬종은 다 된지 약속을 했잖아.
So as for the text, Shantideva's text, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which I was told Shantideva can be dated to the 8th century. So this was a text composed in the 8th century. We are now in 21st century, and to this day, as far as the cultivation of this exchanging of self and others is concerned, Shantideva's text still remains the most excellent.
다전에 다 셈 장니 로 장니 로리아 첨부지 그게 영어로 링두잖아요. 아니 디템벨레도 심지 쇼였어요.
So next is once as a result of training your mind, you have generated you have had some experience within you, then at that point, in order to make that realization stable and firm, then one participates in a rite or a ceremony to really confirm or affirm this generation of awakening mind.
Yeah.
So the next main outline is how, after having generated the awakening mind, one engages into the actual Bodhisattva practices.
남진지 고방사야지 고 두제 쳐심바래. 자, 드네 메이드산에 대 규수 견례되는 연구야래. 드네 인도산에 대 규소 다 럽고야래. 규소 다 뒤에 상담 만화스다 규소 용수만. 뒤에 있는 그림 만화. 드네 지기타네다 냠네 제거야래. 디 님부수 되베이나 고불루고 주주베 뭐어디 메이다. 개원디 경우가 수남시 소화서 수남시来저 탐박군이 탑을 셔 전에다 송샤야 다 군이 탑야기 두디 선호서도 이식서 디임바리 다 초니부디 파 전부 받아 시차로 담배 그돌라 바로도 치고 초 다시 실지 바로도 치말이야 탑지 바로도 치고 뭐 그래 또지 바로도 치면서 봐 체인지 전에 벌써 쭉 이러셔
So and since what the practitioner is aspiring for is the attainment of Buddha's omniscient state, and since omniscient state is an attainment that comes as a result of causes and conditions, one needs to seek the causes and conditions, and there not only the causes and conditions, but all the complete causes and conditions, and the right causes and conditions. And here, this includes many different practices. But if one were to summarize them, then as Nagarjuna points out in his dedication verse of the 60 stanzas of reasoning, where he says that may through this virtue all beings accomplish the two collections, and on that basis attain the Buddhahood that is characterized by the two kayas, two embodiments, form body and truth body. So here the main factors that are necessary for the attainment of Buddhahood are identified as the collection of merit and accumulation of wisdom. And if we were to elaborate these two accumulations a little bit further, then these are explained in terms of the 6 perfections. And if we elaborate the 6th perfection, which is the perfection of wisdom, further, then we have 4 more perfections. Altogether, there are 10 perfections according to that list. So these are the conditions and the causes that one needs to cultivate in order to attain Buddhahood.
That is subject is sunwa. Simgene jabalo lokkobe gyuzen. Tabshi rewol lebe sanje minjubur tamba. Lebe rimba nisha bas. Da tabshi da ando 되게 쉬는 시에 가서 주디. 청주 사야지. 주번냠네 제니 청주 토야래 말도 너는 좀 주도하지 말이스. 너는 더 저장 주도야 말이. 가다 쌤도 쭉고요. 제니도 전에 저발로 lokko버치. 다 저발로 넘네. 저바디 탑시 돌드나 탑시 가서 초니 송대야디 탑시니 버리 탑시 니가로 상황을 거래스 가래스로나 탑기 릭디디 탑기 릭디디 패진 둠베르샤 둠바다 따뜻하게 저외를 듣는 용면로 저라네 베르지베 베르지베 냠는 전에 베르지 동심 간의 샤고 그래서 배진 number 간 rum을 성게 대야견도야디 그 내신 준비 싫어 그 차네 권도 빼고요 아래 다양 싫어 다 지르변 돈이다 왜 싫어 귤 빼나 re pen tong yu da shir gyu le ge ba le ko gyu min ba ji shon na tong yu da shir gyu le ge la la re ji din ri yin zan ne ji tong yu da da gyu le ge ba le ya ji sa jang che hua ya re do wa ya di de tab ji shan ro gu ro da sa tong yu da da ngar ma ji ba sa de ge ya tong yu da da kong ne kong de pe ya ha bo ro ya geng de 아니 동료들도 다 시리브 냠을 깨발라 아니 탑지 나버 끊는데 버지 고요하래 다들 인도산에 시로 권에 권도 배워라 탑지 좋아해 탑지 또 권에 권도 배워라 시로 그 좋아해都是这个아니 조조 산에 산을 지지 시에 산에 살 퍼야지 냠샤고 보여래 냠샤스 전에 시로 동료들도 시로를 냠샤시고 들이 동료를 냠샤시고 딱 띠머리 그래서 인도산에 또뭐 권에 권도 봐야 돼. 냠샤도 봐야지. 다 조조 시럽을 하지도.
When explaining the practices of the six perfections, Tsongkhapa, this is on page 85 of volume 2, presents the topic in the following main outlines. He says that the reason why you must learn the trainings after developing the awakening mind and demonstrating that you will not become a Buddha by learning either method or wisdom separately. And here Tsongkhapa explains the need for both the method aspect of the path and wisdom aspect of the path, and how it is through the union of both of these one will be able to ensure that all the causes and conditions necessary for the attainment of omniscient Buddhahood is made possible. And so if you look at, and as explained before, and these method and wisdom aspects are presented in the form of six perfections. So if you look at all the practices that belong to the method aspect, such as generosity and morality and so on, there the principal element is really the application, development, cultivation, and application of a more aspiring type of mind, more in the form of aspiration. So even in the case of generosity, although the actual act of giving is important, but what is essentially happening is to really enhance one's intent for giving. So in other words, in the method aspect of the path, the main faculty that is being applied and cultivated and developed really is in the form of an aspiration. Whereas, however, in order for these method aspects of the path to be effective and progress, one needs the faculty of wisdom, which will bring in the sense of conviction and the ascertainment. And then the greater your level of ascertainment and conviction, the more enhanced your practices will be. So similarly, the wisdom aspect of the path needs to be complemented by the method aspect of the path. For example, in the context of cultivating the wisdom of emptiness, realization of emptiness, in order for that to occur, we need to make our mind or heart receptive to that realization. And therefore, in order to make our mind receptive for the realization of emptiness, one needs to engage in practices of purifying negativity and increasing our merits. And once through the combination of purification of negative karma and increasing of our merits, we make our heart receptive so that the wisdom of emptiness can arise in it. So we can see how the two factors, aspect of the path, the method and wisdom, they really complement each other and reinforce each other and mutually enhance the development of each other. And so it is the method that help the practitioner to cultivate realization of emptiness where there isn't a realization yet occurred, and where the realization has occurred, it is the method aspect that will help that realization to become more enhanced and progress. And in particular, it is the method aspect of the path that will ensure that one's realization of emptiness, that wisdom, becomes a powerful antidote against subtle obscuration to knowledge and becomes a cause for enlightenment. And similarly, when you look at the way in which one understands the progression from one level to the next level on the path, the actual progression on the Bodhisattva levels really occur when someone is in the meditative equipoise on emptiness. So it is ultimately the quality of the wisdom that would determine progression on the path. So therefore, wisdom being the principle, and the method aspect becomes a complementary factor.
다 전에 수바 러버러버 좀 버셔봐라. 다 배달이 무슨다. 다 전에 다 가다 친구래. 다 대조 바로 좀 툭. 다 될래야 진수심 배줘 봐. 바로 좀 툭 써야 되겠다. 장례식 정도가 될래야 가서 의기도 장내 봤어. 아니 샬라 그림이 왔단 이소에 must
Yes.
So
when explaining the six perfections, Tsongkhapa explained this in the following outlines. He says that how all the precepts are included in the six perfections, and this is further divided into the following: a discussion of the main topic, the fixed number of perfections, and an ancillary discussion of the fixed order of the perfections.
다디 장애 뭔들 때문에 장애 세송돼야 당은 디디 해지디 질 장애 시행도 전에 다 장강 해 봐. 다 바로도 좀 죽시는 장강 해 봐야 돼야지. 질 장애래야 풍성세의 장애 있어. 그러나 담반 이수를 나와 있나 풍성세의 장애인 거래. 다 담반 시스를 나와 있나 해지 거바지 장애 소시면 줘. 다안들이 친구셔야 돼. 배지 거바지 장애 있어요. 다양 로도세의 장애. 직두기 장애. 장애 시험 먹도 봐. 다안들이 배지 거바지 장애 있어요.
So the reference here to the kind of determinate number or fixed number, generally in the text when one talks about a certain division as being fixed or determinate, there are many different kinds of fixed number. For example, if you take the example of the two truths, then it is an exhaustive division, a number. So the number is fixed and it is exhaustive. But if you take the example of the Four Noble Truths, then the determinate status of the number has a very specific purpose. So it's a fixed number for a specific purpose. So my feeling is that the six perfections here shares the similar status. It is not an exhaustive list, but it's more a fixed number related to a particular purpose. Then you have sometimes a certain fixed number and division to help dispel certain misunderstandings. So there are different types of different reasons for making a very fixed determinate number or a list.
다 가다 이제 청주습에 잡아 바로도 신분 줄 장례 수자들이 마송 저는 다디인다 다디는 당부 진배고 다디 그걸 고대버리 가다 디디는 도나체 시행해야지.
So the first of the six perfections is practice of generosity, and the actual explanation of the text itself is fairly straightforward, but it is an important topic. We need to reflect upon this and try to practice.
간다가 또 파르볼 펴마시고 와. 다지 동무 개발시아서 저희들아 그게 펴마시고 와.
So the key point in the context of the practice of generosity, perfection of generosity, is to ensure that it brings benefit to the other. So if you look at the sections dealing with what are the appropriate things to give, appropriate time and so on, the key element here is to ensure that whatever is given is of benefit to the other person.
다전에 다중으로다 수림 다 수림이야 알레 원래 다 짐발이야 상생기 짐바 민지베 짐바 최지 짐바 이 정도.
So in terms of different types of giving, generally text lists three main forms of giving: giving of material needs, giving of protection from fear or fearlessness, and giving of dharma, spiritual teachings.
environment.
So, for example, if one can ensure that one's motivation is correct, then all the work related to environmental protection can become, from the Buddhist point of view, a form of the second type of giving, which is a giving of protection, fearlessness.
And professors teachers lecture
So similarly, with professors and teachers giving lectures and so on to others can be a form of giving of dharma, giving of spiritual teaching.
포지골 삼다는 exchange 지고다. 포지골 삼다는 exchange.
However, if the motivation is purely to get the pay, then it becomes a form of exchange.
Business, like business.
It's like a business transaction.
Even Dalai Lama give lecture in order to receive some money. That is business, not because of the chimba.
So then it doesn't become a giving; it just becomes a business.
뒷 집은 독수들이 최소한사야 돼. 집은스다 총 독수들이 최소한사야 돼.
In fact, traditionally, that form of business is considered to be the worst kind.
대한의 그래서 지선 가사 내는 뉴스 생년 제목상다 가사
젤리.
가 젤리 나서랑들 공 담저 숨샤브나 제 샴바 다셔야 디스 마치야 담저 직체 담저 니버디 아니 샤마시야 담저 숨버디 가주스 나니 묘마시야 어디 송샤 다 최종야 총 독슈레샤스 어다 담저 샤빈스.
So this reminds me of a Tibetan master, Tsele Nazorangdo. In his writing, he's a Nyingma master. In his writing, he speaks of having made 3 pledges, and these 3 pledges were never to ride any animal. Second one was not to eat meat, and third one was not to take any offerings, material offerings, as a result of giving Dharma teachings. And in this context, he says that he realized that taking money from giving teachings seems to be a kind of a business, and this is, he said, is the worst kind of business.
다전에 딘다 수림리야 니주담의 수림 겨추도 수림 심지어는 수림 숨체.
So the second perfection is a perfection of morality, and there are 3 principal types. One is morality in the form of restraining from negative actions, and second is morality in the form of gathering of virtue, virtuous activities, and third is morality in the form of working for others' welfare.
So 되게 디지레샤 배는 너스 차서 doctor서 너스들의 미지구지 버리샤.
So earlier I also forgot to mention that those people who are in the caring professions, such as nursing and medical doctors, their activities can become a form of giving in the second type, which is giving protection from fear.
다전에 근데 수준기 니주담에 수준 써야 돼. 청주 선배 다 domden 소다게 다 domden 집이나 다 김버들 좀 관계 있네. 다 소다고 dom바 집이나 근데 소다고 dom바디 청주 선배 니주담에 수준 좋으시. 소다고 domden 멤버 집이나 미주봉 수준다고 다 자와체체 청주 선배 니주담에 수준 베스팅 버리.
So, since we are talking about morality, so since we are talking about morality or perfections in the context of a Bodhisattva practitioner, we are talking about morality in the context of a Bodhisattva practitioner. So, if the practitioner is someone who has Vinaya vows, individual liberation vows, whether of a lay vows or a monastic vows, then the observance of those vows becomes the first category of morality, which is the morality of restraining from negative actions. And if the person does not have any formal vows of Vinaya, then the morality would be the morality of living one's life according to the principle of abstaining from the 10 negative actions. But however, this should also include for the Bodhisattva practitioner refraining from guarding against the self-cherishing thought as well.
다지네 겨추주 사디리 다 랑기줄리아다 가다 가솔버게 가다 가솔다 베서버도 자체지다 냠린 첸지도 또고줄라 디아디리 겨추주 거래.
So the second category of morality, of gathering virtue, can include all the practices that one engage in, that leads to the development of the various aspects of the path, whether it is relating to profound view of emptiness or the vast practices.
So kurim di dirisha, ngale nyeju tom yadis, shba tangurse. Nyeju tom no, rangi julia gewechu kone konto peya yungri. Dindri me zanen ngale nyeju tom tangurse. Tala dene gyawachu suchunche. Rangjulia ji longdo gida yande ba kone konto peya ni yundu zanen, any shandun shadiye ko nuwachu shudrodaji.
So in terms of the sequence, there is also a certain fixed sequence between the three levels of morality, because when one observes the morality of restraining from negative actions, and then enables the individual to have development of the virtuous qualities within one's heart, and once you have developed your own mind in that way, then one will be able to be more capable of bringing about others' welfare. So therefore there is a certain progression within these three types of morality, of restraining from negative actions, to gathering of virtue, to bringing about working for others' welfare. So in this context, in this text, when explaining the third level of morality of working for others' welfare, Tsongkhapa lists 11 different forms of service, and this is explained also in more detail in Tsongkhapa's Tsongkhapa's commentary, exposition of the morality chapter of Asanga's Bodhisattva levels. So to list the 11, very briefly, the first one is to provide assistance where there is a need for assistance. So for example, as a simple example would be if someone is suffering from problems in their leg and has difficulty walking, then just helping that person. So then the second one that is listed is, I don't think it's in this text, but it is from Tsongkhapa's commentary on Asanga's chapter on morality. The second one is to help others when they have level of ignorance in a particular work they are doing, or a means of doing something.
Then that has all been she that's just has all been suyat Nelinsha sort of.
So the third one is to be more proactive in reaching out, for example, being more welcoming of others and so on. And then fourth one is to provide companionship to people who are, going through a difficult time, like such as fear and so on. And to provide companionship and support for someone who is suffering grief or sorrow. Helping those who are in need of immediate material needs, material facilities. And helping those who are trying to seek a shelter.
But remember that never Lama said, the dancer.
Sorry, I misunderstood it. So those who are seeking some form of support, not physical shelter, but more in the form of a mentor or support, kind of emotional support.
But church sharing the Zane, the tree near the Kandaba Parabolia, Russia in the Zane, Parab come the Meva the timber, Chikita Shat. The Ditisha, lot timber, Hazoda, Parab, lot doing the treasure.
And then the next one is to ensure that whatever help you are giving is done in an appropriate way so that it is beneficial to the other person's state of mind.
Then a young tower should be the turn house, Sane, she non juglanka, there, she declared their sorrow, she didn't get under the end of Logical Dipasea, the young tower should be Lam Rim Chenmo.
So next is to provide some form of spiritual kind of counsel so that the person who may be likely to go in a wrong, non-virtuous path is gently steered towards the right path.
That non-really you think I am quite about the summer chicken, the summer salmon juice at the Sunday, and you took you to share.
And then the next one is to, where necessary, take a firm stand, especially when it involves a harm being committed by someone else.
Then it's to due to our Chevina, and to do that.
And the next one that is on the list is that if you have the capability, then where necessary, you should use your magical powers to help others. Of course, that's a long distance question. So this is something that we can defer and reserve for the moment.
Later, not now. Other day,
so these are the 11 forms, ways in which one should work for other sentient beings' benefit, listed in the text. So then the next perfection is perfection of forbearance. So there are principally three forms of forbearance. One is forbearance in the form of being indifferent to the harms perpetrated upon oneself. And the second form of forbearance is forbearance in the form of deliberately embracing harms caused by others, deliberately embracing the hardships and the pains involved, And the third form of forbearance is forbearance developed on the basis of reflecting upon the Dharma teachings or reality or truth.
다 디디 안다디 점심 람림 쳔모 다 준주 콩조 제송도와 준주 농망고 차네.
So in this particular section in Tsongkhapa's text, he really grounds all of his explanation mainly on the basis of Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and he extensively cites from that text.
Shantideva's 6th chapter. A really wonderful sort of explanation. What is it? So what did you say? That
So the next perfection is perfection of joyous effort or joyful perseverance. Yeah.
다 준주리야. 과세 준주. 개화치도 준주. 심지 준주 좀.
So three forms of joyous or joyful perseverance are identified. One is in the form of putting on an armor or armor-like joyous effort. And the second is joyous effort in the form of gathering virtue. And third is joyous effort in the context of working for others' sentient beings' benefit.
다 준주스잖아요. 다디 한테 과세 준주셔야지. 다 치스 나가 내지 발사서로. 가서 심지어는 남에 맨날 깨워져서 내고 이제 신수 준주 벌써 신사 주저셔 과세 준주셔.
So the first type of joyous effort in the form of an armor-like quality is really to cultivate an attitude which takes into account this long temporal kind of frame, cultivating the sentiment that, even for the benefit of a single sentient being, that I shall dedicate myself for eons until the reach of end of space. So, for example, in Panchen Lama's Guru Puja offerings or celebration of the Lama, here he says that even for the sake of a single sentient being, if I were needed to be in the lower realms for an eons at a time, I shall not be disheartened and strive to bring about others' welfare. So this is really talking about this armor-like quality of perseverance.
Yeah. 다디 저기 람림 쳔모 난게 안다 준주 퍼진 송서디에 안다 쇼래 하란다 준주류 좀 봐.
So, and also the main source that, again, Tsongkhapa uses in his Lam Rim Chenmo in explaining the practices of the joyous effort of perfection, again, is from Shantideva's text. It's the 7th chapter of Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life.
다 캠도가 다 대주고 삼된다 싫어.
So,
다디 실하니 수도 예배 인사다 다 친구 살체.
so the next two perfections are perfection of concentration and perfection of wisdom, and these two are covered in the 3rd volume, which has a separate section where the focus is on presentation of calm abiding or tranquil abiding, shamatha, and special insight, wisdom, vipassana.
좋아. 다데네 딘다 도시.
So the next, so these two perfections will be dealt with in the 3rd volume. So the next topic is the 4 factors for attracting others.
다들 성승심바 아니 냠브마와 전에 이 랑도근네 탄던데버지 다그 람도지야 탄저 탄던데베 다 탄던데바 양답에 사도세 양답에 줄을 쬐버 다 가서 그게 담바르시면 되다 치바 다드네 바로 보러 강 담바는 시 소소한 게 튼튼배냐면 제 시안의 지들 시야봐도 튼버지 소소냐면 제 튼주가 튼튼바
So the 4 principal factors for attracting others are the following. The first one is giving what is materially needed, and the second is using eloquent and pleasant speech so that is appealing to the other person, and the third is to leading the other person to a virtuous or rightful path by means of teaching, and the fourth is to living that by one's own example. So whatever you teach others, you must be able to live that yourself by means of an example. So up to this, engaging in the Bodhisattva practices, in the general practices of the Bodhisattva path is completed. Have you brought the third volume with you? So maybe my presentation was a bit too fast.
Oh yeah, that. That's someday the shirp, sinner. Someday shirp solve. That she need the hangdongs level, Jiri she need the hangdongs, not more.
So, when we're talking about triangle abiding, shamatha, and especially inside vipassana, generally speaking, these 2 practices are common to both Buddhist and non-Buddhist classical Indian traditions.
너들 랑글시가 나들이도와 사이 되다 상배책. 아니 디신돈이다 가다 년도이 태과. 아니 전주선배 태과스. 제가 지시심제 감도 매봐 나서고 이거 디시도 아니 태과 나서 인구리 사지.
For example, in Lanka Avatara Sutra, Descent into Lanka Sutra, there is a statement that, and where the Buddha identifies various types of vehicles, and he calls them the vehicles of the celestial beings, vehicles of the humans, and vehicles of the disciples, the vehicles of the Bodhisattvas, and so on. And where the point is made that as long as there would exist among the sentient beings a tremendous diversity of mental dispositions and spiritual inclinations, they will evolve tremendously diverse forms of vehicles, spiritual vehicles.
Pluralism.
So in this sutra, the spirit of pluralism is very clearly presented. So if we try to understand what is meant by the celestial vehicle, celestial being's vehicle and human vehicle, then here probably the primary aspiration is, or the purpose is to present a path that would lead to freedom from immediate suffering.
다 상배 택바 수자네 배지 다 신이시요 신에다 항동.
So then when the Brahma vehicle, the vehicle of the Brahma is presented, then in this context the practices of tranquil abiding, shamatha, and vipassana, special insight, becomes relevant. So here, the main aim is to remove or dispel suffering of change. So here, the main path is to progressively go through the various levels of concentration and formless realm of states. And although the foundation is the cultivation of tranquil abiding shamatha, but the actual path itself is a form of vipassana, special insight that compares the characteristics of the desire realm or the lower realms as opposed to the higher realms.
다 감수 여버지는 두고로다. 다데 감수 여버도야 데 패지 데 르지기다 교 가다 심 다지 다 고르도스던저가 섬차도 샤샤샤 데심스라고. 당한주 다데 심디 강르던 띵지 기딩에 띵지 루딩에 지기 야그 뇨모 데베 뇨모 차당 라버드제 숙충도 신 된대기다 가서 그랬대 mental state도 와 아주 통하도 와 그래서 다 된대기 mental state다 되게 데블이야 아니 순금 패지인 다는지 수미감 다 대낭스게 차라요 그게 있잖아요 되는면도 섬기 패지 샤투면데.
So then this raises the question about the notion of the three realms. So how can we establish the existence of these three realms, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm? One way in which we can kind of understand this is to examine our own states of mind. So if we compare, if we look at our own mind, those states of mind which belong to the desire realm tend to be much more gross. So you have much more grosser levels of afflictions and also other mental thought processes and so on. Compared to this, someone who has gained samadhi, meditative stabilization, will know that there is a subtler, comparatively subtler state of mind where he or she can abide. So, and compare this to the normal, ordinary desire states of mind, desire realms state of mind, then you can see a comparative difference of subtlety. So, and even there at the, in the realm of meditative states, one can see progressively deeper states and so on. So corresponding to this, one can then infer that there might also be resultant states of being, which are the fruits of these various states of mind. So in this way, one can at least understand the existence of the three realms, the desire, form, and formless.
다한테 삼된다 시럽니 아주 젊으시게 너무 두두나 성셔도 많이 라베이나 삼된 섬로 원주 개보대 삼된 세야데 다섬 라바 원주는지 원주습샤시레스 봐 대원 주르에 아니 버나 넘버로 컨트롤스 라베이나 샹나 요미 리 원부신스 소소도에 죄야로 매버체체 그 미고를 해니 샤바이나 리츠분은 신지게 배 해니 되서야 미고도 가라 땅나게 미고 꾸는 주스 다야 봐 최도 남지기 다 상동기 다 시럽기 배다 가서 우리 그게 좌리야 봐 침배 그도를 신내기 뜻이고 되게 강죄에 된 때가 짱짱리야 앞에 좀 제대로 내야 되겠지 내배 차로디 신내체 죄배 니버도 꼴 항동체 용도와 제니 상당히 땅나 교육고 끊는 중 리슬 레스르메 대전데스 아니 심 미고를 제지도 내야게 내자 봐 가서래 나체 예바서 뭐임배 지 친구가 뛰었다 차와 된대지겠다 semne pa top yundu zane ene si lusim gnengele di kale to pa chi pa sop dra ro chi nengele be ta da ka de to sop dra ro chi de ne gi chane ene lusin jang de wa tabe de ingres de lusin jang de simba oda de ingres so imre de da de simbe ene lo de 가서 그게 데베스타데 데바 아니 삼대 당부 아니 녀도 미조메 봤을 때 다디야 시로 신다게 땡제 상도 신다고 땡시하고 죽을 수도 그 페퍼시 미조메 봤을 강례 비자 강게 땡시 돼서 맨도 그래서 니도 미조메 다니 뒤에 셋 뒤에 아니 심지지고 띵도 토요 거야 가사 토바레스라 토용구레스 다시 메나들이 가서 선선 상당히 많이 다른 경우 그래서 무슨 대신에 대다신 난저 원본은 남이 장조 띵지 균도 댄스
So in describing the quality of concentration embodied in this attainment of tranquil abiding, Tsongkhapa describes in his Songs of Spiritual Experience, Lam Rim in verse, he describes the following characteristics, which may be helpful for us to understand. He says that concentration, he's referring to now tranquil abiding. He says concentration represents, attainment of concentration represents kind of a mastery over one's mind, and then therefore it's like it has a king-like quality. And the mastery of the mind is such that if one chooses to simply place that mind upon a chosen object, it will be so firm, like the solidity of a mountain. So it just stays, where you place the mind. And if, on the other hand, if you use it to analyze a chosen fact, then you will be able to apply it to any chosen virtuous object. So here he is talking, of course, about the accompaniment of the faculty of vipassana on the basis of shamatha. So here what we see is that the stability of the mind comes from shine, shamatha, and the analysis element of that is the vipassana. So both of these can come together. And then he says that furthermore, concentration will give rise to an experience of a bliss, great bliss, and that makes one's body and mind supple, serviceable. And here he is talking about the attainment of physical and mental pliancy, which involves the gradual thinning of a kind of a natural inertia. So as our natural kind of inertia comes to become more and more thinner and thinner, then our body and mind becomes more and more pliant and supple, and this then gives rise to an experience of a bliss. So therefore he says that the yogis who are cultivating concentration therefore must apply this and cultivate this concentration which demolishes all the foes in the form of distractions and uphold this meditative stabilization.
네, 뭐시부치기. 네, 배자야래. 아니 차트해야 되는지. 로몽구지 줄리아 대체 저 공부도 신의 공부지. 신의 공부를 쟤는 급질이야. 코로나 집에 대념으로 쉬우시게 돼야지. 디페지dim다. 루신장 대화사 되심다.
I know actually a monk who had studied in the scholastic monasteries, and so he was well learned in the classical Buddhist text, but also did a lot of many years of meditation. He lived in Bhutan for a while, so he meditated upon shamatha, tranquil abiding, and so once he told me that there was a point when his experience was really permeated by a sense of bliss. So it seems that he was talking about this bliss derived from physical and mental pliancy.
다지네 싫어. 다들 빼지 말고 인사 빼지 된 거는 좀 뭐지 봐. 빼지 말자. 엔 추주한 무슨 상에 추주 계거든다.
So since most of people did not bring their third volume, so I cannot read from the text, and still we have more time, so I'm trying to keep the time, fill the time.
Yes.
So passing the time.
다 싫어리야. 이 싫어 사면 되니 따에 믹. 스잔에 아니 싫어라. 그슬러나 지리. 지 가다 딱 맞는 거 알아서 지 랍다 셔보도 지도 랍좀 쳐야 뒤에 상황로 가다 싫어고 싶다는 거 되고 왔다. 서 랍잔다면 먹고 싶은 거 알아. 랍잔다면데 차네 아니 싫어리야. 내가 이거 구조도 싫어. 내가 싫어서. 그러다 지금 잘 변별이하는 이유다. 야가에서다. 야가 미드리. 진짜 처왕아. 진짜 총왕아. 진짜 주스잖아. 셔대가 그래. 자, 다들 인도산에 배가 자르고 참아르고 나중에 쳐야지. 소리고. 네네. 가래고 자르고 참아르고 낭전르고. 지식도와 진짜 쉬면 나온다. 내가 다시 그 제자 시기가 그래. 자, 들이 인도 아나 드즈자디 냥아르고 그주도 싫었어. 단 내로르고 전도도 싫었어. 단도 끔들 타와도 탐지집에 고만주야 그셔도 항동 공부에 인도산에 디니 또 것이 고기였다. 대권 가서 지도도 싫어. 다 드리 인도 안데 디니 사디 대권은 이담 지도를 자네 바로도 심어 주시에 나네 단담 때마 대권은이 그바로 제시도 그 가서 우리 샤네 뒤도겐디 싫어버리스 싫어지고레스 근데 이제는 가서 싫어 가서 됐지
싫어 something이다.
싫어 something이다 믹스 시베자와 중년 집에 람스 다 시베자와 디무텐지체 다들 러시메바 마와다 디타니 샤베이나 디무텐지체 다 디무텐진데 뭐지냐 부정인데 미국 지금은 진당 개관에 진당 관계도 소화관에 애는 내셔널리제이션 손등에디 다 돈이도 싫어 장장이 버려 드리 미드산에 싫어서 시베자와 중년 집에 람스 윤주고 있냐 보서도 마세베 터도 싫고 있냐 보대요 뭐지냐 보대 돈이도 싫어 과르래 질 가서 우리 봐도다 최계 제배이나 고런 도시 대비 띵이지 다디 다나 돈이도 싫어 차대요 나 라미 흉커도네 로바타이 던져서 시다디 돈이도 싫어 과르 차대요 그래서 인도산에 시베자와 중년 집에 남 시베자와 디무 댄진다 대시학과 박자 시리드잖아 대 탐자로 순진지긴 뭐 소디 싫어들레스 돈이도 싫어들레스 디소이 싫어서 팀 시베자 없는 집에 남 송으로 끈래 나고 연대때스 다 디시베 아니 송으로 타다 대코는 일을 쇼 대코는 일을 봐봐 대코는 일을 봐봐 전에 취지진이 가서 땡진 일을 삼죠 태양양은 다시 시주면서 결함에 선 소나신 다 좀된데 렁이기 땅원도 제가 고반 텔레야 치야기 다 탑코나 다 탑순종의 지기 말이야 다 뭐도 기회관에 남지 제가서 치야기 탐버시기 말이야 근데 이번 일산에 돈이 따와데 송로 끈데 nga ba che ches de so go nga ba de timu men se zhen chao ta timu men ba se ji ta ji ja ne de go de ya ji ni den zi timu ja ne de ta ya mi shi be ta 내가 를 먹고 저도 싫었으니까 이게 야 라랑게 간다 된체다 텔로 몽배 연구를 받다 제너와다 지드신이 이게 더 강이네 다 몽배 몇 생에게 아니 재밌다 그래서 두면서 대사신은 다들 해봐 람드 배워 두면 개번째
So, with respect to wisdom, Tsongkhapa writes in the same Lam Rim verse, Songs of Spiritual Experience, he says that wisdom refers to the eyes that with which one sees the profound suchness. And generally speaking, when we talk about wisdom, we are talking about the faculty of intelligence, which needs to be developed even in the context of conventional education. So, for example, in the educational settings, one of the main qualities that we are developing and applying is really wisdom. And therefore, in the Buddhist text also, when we speak about wisdom, we talk about wisdom pertaining to the facts of conventional reality and wisdom pertaining to the facts of ultimate reality. So within the conventional domain, of course, the Tibetan classical tradition follows the model of classical Indian tradition. So we speak of 5 main fields of knowledge and 5 secondary fields of knowledge. So altogether there are cultivation of wisdom in the fields of 10 fields of knowledge. So the 5 principal fields of knowledge, again modeled upon the classical Indian tradition, are the study of the linguistics, primarily Sanskrit linguistics. There is the study of logic and epistemology, the Praman, and the study of healing, science of healing or medicine, and the study of arts and crafts, and what is called the inner science. And then the minor fields of knowledge includes many other forms. So these are, in the classical Indian model, seen as important fields of knowledge in which an educated person must cultivate and apply their wisdom. However, here, in the context of our practice, the wisdom really refers to the wisdom understanding the ultimate reality, the suchness of things. And here Tsongkhapa says that, so therefore, he says wisdom is the eye with which one sees the profound suchness, and it is the path by which one eradicates from the root of cyclic existence. And this is, as explained before, because the root of cyclic existence is the delusion, particularly in the form of grasping a true existence. And it is the wisdom of emptiness, the cultivation of which provides us the direct antidote that opposes the perspective of this fundamental ignorance, and by this, in that way, is able to root it out. So therefore, Tsongkhapa says that wisdom is the path by which one eradicates the root of cyclic existence. And then he says that and it's the treasure of high qualities presented in all the amongst all the scriptures. And here Tsongkhapa is pointing out that the teaching on wisdom is really the treasure of all the Buddha's teachings, and because ultimately and Kamala Shila makes this very explicit in his stages of meditation. So this is here Tsongkhapa is alluding to the statement that all the teachings of the Buddha, either directly or indirectly, converges upon the teaching on emptiness. So they may be pointing towards emptiness, they may be actually leading to emptiness, or they may be actually settled upon emptiness. So here, Tsongkhapa, for example, writes in his praise to the Buddha for teaching dependent origination, or in praise of dependent origination, where Tsongkhapa says that, referring to the Buddha, whatever you have taught from the point of view of, or taught from the point of view of dependent origination. And in your speech, there is nothing that does not lead to the attainment of freedom or peace. Let me rephrase this. Whatever you have taught, you have done so from the point of view of dependent origination. And that too, you have taught for the sake of attainment of nirvana. And therefore, you do not engage in any activity that somehow is not contributing towards the attainment of peace and tranquility. So this is what Tsongkhapa is pointing towards. And then he says that, and therefore, wisdom is the most excellent lamp to dispel the darkness of delusion.
Now 11:33. Finish. Thank you.